When I turned about 45 years old, I noticed some changes in my body, specifically in where I was storing body fat and then how easily I would gain weight. Now, I just want to be totally transparent here. I did not have a weight issue. I was not overweight. And in fact, at times, I was probably more leaning toward being underweight. However, what I did notice was that I would put on body fat easier than when I was in my 30s or 20s, and that the body fat was distributing in different places. So the shape of my body was really starting to change. In my 20s and 30s, I always had that hourglass shape, very small waist. Most of the weight I carried was through the glutes, through the hips, through the thighs, like many women. A little bit in the belly, but not a lot. And then when I hit 40, it began this gradual shift. And by 45, I noticed that less of the body fat was going to the glutes, through the thighs, to the hips, and more was going to the midsection, in particular the lower abs. And then it seemed like there was a part of my lower belly that was almost hard. It wasn't like the pinch and inch. Now, at the time, I had no idea. To me, it just seemed like I was gaining weight, when in reality, the scale really wasn't going up all that much. It was my body fat that was increasing. And I just kind of chalked it up to age. And it wasn't until much later when I began to learn about nutrition, hormones, perimenopause, and menopause that I had a full realization of what was happening to my body and that it was indeed normal. It happens to most women that when they transition from perimenopause, the years leading up to menopause, through menopause, they are more likely to often gain weight or gain body fat, not always, but when they do gain the body fat, it is more likely to head to the midsection, to the abdomen, and less likely to go to the spots where you would like it to go. So, this is going to be the topic of today's episode. I want to dive into why we might be gaining weight or body fat, and I'm going to distinguish between the two in a moment, why we might be gaining weight or body fat in perimenopause and definitely after we transition through menopause. We're going to break down the science. So first of all, to distinguish between body fat and scale weight. Now, if you just weigh yourself on an average scale and the scale does not give you any data except that one number, your weight, you really aren't getting a very clear idea of what is happening with your body. So yes, it gives you a number of how much you weigh, but it doesn't tell you how much lean muscle you have, skeletal muscle. It doesn't tell you how much body fat you have, the proportion. And this is valuable because if we just look at the number, we can be deceived by that. So let's say a woman goes on a diet, she's 55 years old, she really restricts her calories, she ups her movement and exercise quite a bit, she starts to lose weight, and the scale is telling her that she's down 10 pounds. Was that 10 pounds of body fat she lost, or was that 10 pounds of valuable skeletal muscle? And this is why I have started really being regular with tracking this. I go to my nurse practitioner and I have a scan done, an in-body scan, DEXA scan, and then I also have a scale at home called an Eros scale, and I'm going to share the link to that along with my code to get a discount on this scale. And the company actually reached out to me, and since I've been using it the last couple of weeks, I'm really impressed with the data and the quality of the scale. And even if the data is a little bit off, because a lot of times it can be off as far as body fat is concerned, if you're using the same measure at the same time of day under the same circumstances, you're going to be able to track trends. So you're going to be able to tell if that number is going up or going down, if you have less body fat, more body fat, but at least you're getting more information than simply what is contained in the number on the scale. So that's really where we need to begin in perimenopause, going through menopause. We really need to start to track these numbers. Now, I'm going to share with you some of the science, some of the data around hormones. Much of this you've heard me say before. Some of it might be new, and if you're a new listener, this will definitely be some new information for you. But it's critical to understand because I talk about this a lot, but I see that a lot of times women simply aren't getting it. They're hearing me, they're knowing that what I'm saying is potentially true, but they're really not understanding how it relates to them. So that's what I want to dive into in this episode. So at the beginning of perimenopause, and that's going to vary from woman to woman. Some women are going to enter this in their late 30s. Some might even enter it in their mid 30s. Most women, it's going to begin to occur in our 40s. The amount of estrogen and many times progesterone that we actually produce within our bodies within a month begins to have a downward decline, a downward shift. But it's not a straight downward decline. That would almost be a little bit easier. It's a roller coaster ride where it's up and it's down, and sometimes estrogen is up and progesterone is down, creating a situation called estrogen dominance, which I've also spoken about here before. I'm going to quickly define that for you. So estrogen dominance doesn't necessarily mean that you have excessively high estrogen in your body. Now, it could, but for most women in perimenopause, it simply means that estrogen is high in relationship to progesterone. So it's imbalanced. So her estrogen is declining, but it might be high because it's much higher than progesterone, because progesterone really starts to make an exit as we move through perimenopause. And once again, it's not a steady decline. It's bouncing up and down. This can last anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So it could start at 40 and go all the way to 50. It could start 45 to 55. It could go 5 years. It just is going to vary based on the woman. And then also some of her lifestyle habits would play into this as well. The declining estrogen levels are doing several things to our body. Estrogen plays a role in our ability to put on muscle and hold on to that muscle, synthesize protein. And we have estrogen receptors pretty much all over our body. It's hard to find an organ where we don't have estrogen receptors that are being affected by this decline. So we start to see that shift in where we store body fat, as I mentioned before, where it is deposited. Most women, it's going to head to the abdomen and not to the glutes. So I know what happened with me because I was doing a lot of excessive running and I was going through this rapid decline in hormones and this kind of bit of a roller coaster ride. And what I started to see is, yes, my scale weight was within a range, give or take a little bit, but I looked softer, and I looked softer through the midsection, and I wasn't as toned. They call it toned. People have, I don't know why they have a huge problem with that word, but I'm going to use it here because it's a word that resonates with women. And when I say it, they understand. When I say tone and definition, women get it right away. When we're referring to tone, what we're really referring to is you have muscle on your body, but then you're lean enough that the muscle actually shows. And this is what we do in bodybuilding competitions. We bring down body fat so that muscle tone or muscle definition begins to show. It is really the definition of the muscle showing because the body fat is low enough for that to be visible. So when I say tone, that's what I'm referring to, but many women think of tone as muscle. And like I said, I don't like to get hung up on terminology. I see way too much of that right now. Use this word, don't use that word. This one's wrong, that one's right. Really, we need to be able to communicate as coaches what we're talking about here. All right, so we see that tone start to decline. It's going to decline in the legs, in the glutes. It's going to decline through the shoulders and arms. We start to look a little fluffy and soft. At least I did. And I noticed it in pictures. I noticed it in the mirror. I began to feel very self-conscious. And so the more I saw this, the more I ran. Needless to say, it backfired because the belly fat was still happening. So the body fat was still wanting to accumulate in the midsection, but I was losing the muscle in my legs and glutes rapidly. And in fact, I just recently released a program or opened it up for enrollment called Buns and Guns Boot Camp. As you listen to this, it is getting ready to close its doors, but I will go ahead and include the link in case you do listen to this before July 5th, and you can hop in on it. And the reason I created the program wasn't so much because I was encouraging women to have these huge glutes or be bodybuilders. It's because of this change in body fat distribution. And one of the best things we can do to help that is to put on muscle, and to put on muscle in the lower body. We want it everywhere. But when we put on lower body muscle, we are more likely to be insulin sensitive, meaning that blood glucose is at good levels. It is not dysregulated. So when we're insulin resistant, we often have high highs. We crash down the other side with spikes. We start to have a problem with insulin. This leads to insulin resistance, or it can, and it can eventually lead to prediabetes and diabetes. We become vulnerable to this as we transition into menopause. So putting that muscle on your body, and in particular through the legs and glutes, is going to be extremely helpful. It's one of the main reasons that I put the program together. Plus, let's face it, we all want to look great. So check it out if it's before July 5th. So then we're dealing with different types of aging here as well. We have the chronologic aging, which all of us go through regardless. We're talking men, women. That's your basic, okay, you're 50, you're 55, you're 60, you're getting older. It's how many birthday candles, and the body will start to have a breakdown from age, usually at the cellular level. Then there's what's called endocrine aging. This is where we're discussing your endocrine system, basically your hormones, and the function starts to decline and dysregulate. We begin to have a problem with cortisol, which is the fight or flight stress hormone. It can be too high. Many times I've actually seen it too low. I have a couple of clients that have experienced this where the cortisol is way too low, and this is not a good situation. We often think of high as being the problem, but as we transition through menopause and there's this stress on the adrenal system because the adrenals try to hop in and make estrogen to make up for the ovaries. The fat cells, the body fat, also does the same thing, and that's one of the theories of why we're holding on to body fat and storing it more easily, is this transition that we're going through, this decline in estrogen, and our body's trying to make up for this. In the meantime, if you're doing the wrong type of exercise, the wrong amount, and the wrong type of nutrition, you're going to make this issue even worse. So what's happening to our ovaries and our endocrine function and what we go through is very, very different than what a man goes through. Now, he has his drop in testosterone, but we drop to less than 1% of estrogen. So we have a much quicker and more severe drop. A man's is more gradual and is more likely to be noticeable when he goes through his version of menopause, usually after the age of 60. Sarcopenia is a problem. This is the loss of muscle that's related to age. It is reversible. The earlier you start, the better. And so what do we have now? We have women that are overly fat and under muscled. Now, when I say overly fat, I'm not saying that in a derogatory name calling way. So I want to distinguish here. People are awfully sensitive these days. And if you don't spell things out, sometimes they take offense. What I mean is more body fat than what we should have. In particular, really the problem is the visceral body fat that wraps around the organs. And I'm going to really define that a little bit more deeply than I have in the past so you can understand what's going on. So you have the pinch and inch, which is really, yeah, it's annoying and we don't like the way it looks, but it is not a big deal. It's not metabolically active. It's not as big a deal, I should say, as the visceral body fat, which is dangerous. So we lose muscle. Because we have less muscle, it means we have more body fat. And in order to prevent this from happening, we obviously need to have some type of resistance or strength training. And we also need to be having enough protein. And it is a myth that we need less protein as we age. We actually need more because we do not break it down as well. We don't synthesize it. We don't use it as well. This is part of these declines. And even if you're on hormone replacement therapy, this will help immensely, but you still have to be conscious because there still is a decline in our ability to synthesize the protein. Yes, HRT, and when I say HRT, I mean hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And I'm definitely not pushing that issue, but I'm going to give you some information in this podcast a little later on. So hold on and definitely stay tuned for the end because I am going to talk about the HRT just a little bit more and the Women's Health Initiative, which was a study that followed several women over the course of several years and caused a lot of fear in women, including myself. And this study is over 20 years old now. I think it started in the 90s and went on from several years from there. So now we're in 2023. So this is an older study that still ignites a lot of fear, and the mindset around it is just now shifting. So I want to just touch on that. So yes, HRT can help, but it's never really quite the same as what your body can produce on its own when we're young. I mean, that's just how it is. It's just a tool in the toolbox. And as I said, I'm definitely not pushing it. It's not for every woman, but I feel it is necessary to touch on here because it can be helpful. So what do we need for protein? And the recommendations vary. I tend to like saying 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So if a woman's 300 pounds and she wants to lose 150 pounds, she is going to do closer to 150 grams of protein, not 300 grams, which would be next to impossible for her to get in, and it would not support her goals. So you're looking at what you think your ideal body weight is, maybe a little bit below that. It's going to vary based on the woman, based on the activity level. If somebody's in the gym lifting on the regular, they're going to find that they need more protein to support that lifting routine. So some recommendations go with the kilograms, which is 1.5 grams for every kilogram of lean body mass. So not just body mass or weight, but lean body mass. So what this works out to be roughly for most women is 75 to 100 grams. I personally find 75 too low. I like to see a woman at 100 and above. So the average woman, just to give you an idea, is getting approximately 45 to 60 grams of protein per day. So she's falling way short of that. And if she is a vegan or a vegetarian, it's even lower. 30 grams is typically what is known in the literature as the amount that a woman can handle in a setting. I sometimes will do 40 grams. I am very active, and sometimes the 30 grams just isn't enough to fill me up. So I'll add that extra scoop of protein or a little extra ounce in there to get that 40 grams. But for most women, coming in with your meals around 30 grams. Now, if you're only eating 3 times a day, which with time restricted eating, that's often the recommendation. Time restricted eating, otherwise known as intermittent fasting, is where you fast for a period and then you have a feeding window. It's not the same really as doing these 24, 48-hour and extended fast. It can include that, but it really is mostly looking at day to day. So it could be a 12 to a 16-hour fast, and then you would have an 8 to a 12-hour eating window. What I recommend is have the eating window large enough that you can get your protein in. That's really going to be key. And then once in a while, you can throw in a longer fast for the reason of autophagy, which is that cellular rejuvenation and repair that can be so valuable. But I personally have found about 14 hours. I honestly don't even really consider it fasting anymore. I go about 14 hours, and that leaves me a good 10-hour window to fit in all my meals. Sometimes I will do 16. It depends on how I've slept, my energy level, and I am careful to plan out my meals carefully. I aim for about 120 to 130 grams of protein per day. My weight kind of varies It's usually around 120 to 124, up and down. Sometimes it dips a little below that, a little above, but that's kind of the range that I'm in. So that's what I typically do within a day. And for me to get that all in, it is typically 3 meals with a protein shake. And I consider the protein shake a little less of a meal and more of a supplement. Visceral fat. Let's go back to the visceral fat. So visceral fat is the fat that gets deposited around the abdominal organs, and it can wrap around your heart. People don't talk about that very often, but that is a consequence of this type of body fat. And you will see it in fatty liver disease, so it'll wrap around the liver and around the bowel as well. That type of body fat is metabolically active. So you might be thinking, well, that's great, metabolically active, muscle's metabolically active. It's the wrong type of metabolically active. It's the kind we don't want because it increases inflammation. And this is why it creates cytokines. I always get that word. I always get that word wrong, so I have to look down at my notes. It creates cytokines, and cytokines are capable of creating their own inflammatory organ, so to speak. So it becomes an endocrine organ. This body fat becomes an endocrine organ that is pumping out these inflammation markers and raising inflammation, which in turn raises the possibility of chronic disease, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, things such as that. And we want to minimize this type of fat as much as possible and eliminate it. So you get this kind of negative loop or cycle that you get caught in, where it starts to be associated with the estrogen level. So you have the decline of the estrogen. You're more likely to put on body fat. That body fat is more likely to go to the midsection as opposed to the glutes and the thighs. And it is more likely to be visceral, which is the dangerous inflammatory body fat. So let's just keep all of that in mind. A quick note here, because if I don't say it, I know I'm going to forget to say it. There's some great research coming out about the cold plunges. The cold plunges can be beneficial in reducing that type of body fat and increasing the brown body fat, which is the good body fat, which helps with our metabolism. So it's something that you might want to research and dig into it. Andrew Huberman has done a few podcasts on this, so I suggest heading over to Huberman Labs, his podcast, and checking out his episode on cold plunges. You want fiber at about 25 grams per day, and most women are getting about half of this, maybe even a third of it, and I'm guilty of this. I have always struggled with a sensitive stomach, and sometimes if I overdo fibrous things and vegetables, I have trouble. So increase it slowly. Start to use some type of tracker. It doesn't have to be MyFitnessPal. That's obviously the one most people are familiar with, but I think there is one called Carbon that I've been hearing a lot about. I actually heard JJ Virgin talk about this one, and so I'm going to check that one out so you can take a look at that as well and track that fiber. It will track your fiber as well as your protein, carbs, and fats. You want to limit your sugars, your added sugars. Now, this doesn't count the little bit of sugar that might be in, say, carrots or certain vegetables, or the sugar that is contained within fruit is not part of this number. Now, this is the deal with fruit. This is my stance on it, and it comes partially from research I've done, and then partially just from my own experience cutting for bodybuilding shows. When I say cutting, I mean shredding down. So when we get ready for a bodybuilding show, we'll have fruit up until about, it just depends on the individual. For me, it was about the 8-week mark. And then I just don't have it for a while until after the competition, and then I put it back in. And this is the deal. If you're trying to take your body fat down, you're just looking for every little tactic and tool of reducing sugar, or reducing any way that your body can hold body fat. Now, obviously, if you're not competing, you just want to limit your fruits. You want fruits that are lower in sugar, lower on the glycemic index, such as berries, and you want to limit. I limit to 1 serving per day, sometimes even a half serving. It's just something I throw into my smoothie for a little bit of flavor, a little bit of fiber, and the nutrients. Fruit behaves differently because it does have fiber. Now, if you juice it, all bets are off. If you're drinking orange juice, it's different than eating an orange. If you're drinking apple juice, it's different than drinking an apple. But what I'm really talking about here is the sneaky added sugars within food. Now, labels now have to contain information on added sugars. It's typically below the carbohydrates, so you have to go all the way down the label. But I recommend reading the labels and keeping track of your added sugars and keeping them below 25 grams. So let's talk about, I'm not going to go into the whole study of the Women's Health Initiative. What I want to go into is how some of that information could have gotten taken out of context and blown up to be something it's not. And I'm just going to touch on it briefly. For a more thorough unpacking of this subject, so to speak, I would head over to Dr. Peter Attia's podcast, The Drive, and find the episode where he talks about female hormones. And it's very extensive, and he talks about this study. It'll be far more in-depth than what I give you. So typically, most women are going to start hormone replacement therapy somewhere 50 to 59 in that age range, depending on when they go through menopause. And if we were to follow them for 5 years, in a 5-year period, the chance of a woman with no hormones getting breast cancer is 23 out of 1,000. And then if estrogen only is added, the risk might be slightly above that or the same. So about 23 out of 1,000 increased risk. And we have to understand that that wasn't really what was used with the WHI. So in other words, they weren't using bioidentical estrogen is what I'm trying to say. They were using synthetic hormones, and that was really the issue. But let's look at the risk of other factors. So the risk of being obese or overweight is 44 out of 1,000. So obesity and having this visceral body fat is probably going to be more of a risk in most cases than doing the bioidenticals. Now, don't quote me on every little thing I'm saying here because I am not giving medical advice. I'm not a medical provider. I'm not a medical doctor. This is my personal opinion based on reading the research. And time will tell with myself. I've been on bioidentical since I was 51. I'm 62, and I don't plan on going off unless something happens where I have to go off them for whatever reason. Now, obviously, if you've had breast cancer, especially the kind that is fueled by estrogen, you will want to consult with your doctor and do what your doctor recommends is the best for you under the circumstances. What I'm looking at is basically if you just took a woman and she had no other health issues, no breast cancer, this would be the risks. And then if you added in the obesity, that would be the risk. As I mentioned before, you want to know what your weight is made up of, how much skeletal muscle that you have. And what I've been seeing a lot of is it's not just being overweight, we're under lean. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of a story. A few weeks ago, I had made a post about focusing more on muscle and less on scale weight and body fat. Well, it was completely taken out of proportion to the point I had to take down both posts on Facebook and Instagram because of the messages I received, and people were just completely confused by it. And so I just want to talk about it for a moment. And I also talked about not using the before and afters of my clients. And there's a few different reasons for that. Most of my clients are 50 and above, 55 and above, 60 and above, and they do not want their pictures on Instagram and Facebook, even with the face removed. And now there are a few that have allowed me to change the name and kind of black out, blur out the face. And that just felt a little funny to me because it's like I'm posting these pictures with no face, and it was dehumanizing it a bit. So what I wanted to do is focus more on case studies where perhaps there is a picture of a woman, but it's her story. And so that's where I'm taking my testimonials now. There will still be before and after testimonials, but they won't just be focused on the body. They're going to be focused on all of the health changes that that woman has experienced. It's going to be focused on how she looks today. And really, if a woman cares to post her before and after, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm probably going to still use mine because they're just such a good visual tool for me to say what I mean by certain concepts. But it's just not my focus going forward because I don't want to be another one of these fat loss coaches where it's just all you see when you go on their website. I mean, it almost makes your head spin. It's so many of them. I really want to make these testimonials a little more human. And so that was where I was going with that. Well, I even had a few individuals thinking that I was hopping on board with the body positivity movement and the plus size models and all of that. And I'm going to give my opinion on that in just a moment. I wasn't. That wasn't the purpose. It wasn't a body positivity post. The purpose was to get women to focus on muscle because I still see that they're afraid of muscle. They will come to me and say things like, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I just want to tone up. And I get what they're saying. I know what they're saying. They don't want to be huge and they want to look feminine and they don't want to hit the stage. Totally get it. But if you're in the weight room and you are training various body parts and you are trying to get an aesthetic look, aesthetic means perhaps you want more round shoulders, more sculpted glutes, better looking legs. You're a bodybuilder, in my opinion. You don't have to do a bodybuilding championship. You don't have to ever compete a day in your life. You're still a bodybuilder. And I know men and women at the gym who bodybuild that don't do bodybuilding shows. Bodybuilding doesn't mean taking a bunch of steroids and jacking yourself up. Now, it could, if somebody's competing in that world, it could for them. But for me, what it means is you are really putting muscle on your body. That's what it means to me. You're getting stronger and you're working on certain body parts that might be lagging. You're a bodybuilder. So I see this kind of fear still of the weights, fear still of muscle, and it is more in my demographic. So by the time they get to me, a lot of times if they're over 60, they're highly resistant to what I'm trying to tell them. They are focused on the cardio, they're focused on the scale, they're not understanding what I'm saying. Muscle is the organ of longevity, as Dr. Gabrielle Lyon says, and she's 200% right about this. Your muscle is protective. Your muscle means your metabolism is higher. Yay, I can eat more. I don't have to starve myself. Your muscle means that if you take a fall, you are less likely to be seriously injured from that fall. You have some strength. You have some protection over your body. It looks fantastic. As women, we're not going to get huge. Only a few women have that genetic predisposition to really pack it on. It's pretty rare. I had a friend like that in high school that all she did, she was a lifeguard and she swam all the time and she was on the swim team. And she had muscle like a dude, I'm telling you, and she did nothing to get that muscle. And all of her sisters were like, there was clearly a very strong genetic component. She was very tall, very big boned, close to 6 foot tall, lots of muscle on her body without doing a thing. That is extremely rare, and she is actually the only person I've met that way in my entire almost 62 years of life. So you don't have the hormone levels that men have to put on that amount. There's nothing to be afraid of. So this is why I made the post I did. I want to take my brand, my personal brand as Cavino Fitness, what I'm doing with women, and I want to move more into let's get strong. Let's put on quality skeletal muscle. Now, do I still work with clients on fat loss? Absolutely. because if the body fat is too high or they're carrying this visceral body fat, this is a health risk and we need to bring it down. And one of the ways we bring that down is to have this endocrine organ called muscle, the biggest organ in your body, and metabolically active in a good way and anti-inflammatory. So that's part of that process. The second half of that is the protein piece and the nutrition, moving away from ultra processed foods. Ultra. Notice I didn't say processed, because if you buy lentils or you buy beans, they're processed. They've been put in a package or whatever. So not every processed food is bad. I'm talking the ultra processed food, the Frankenstein food that's not really food. So that's where I was going with that post. And it's interesting to live in this time because you feel like you have to tiptoe around and say things a certain way and in certain words, or people are down your throat. I've never seen anything like what is happening right now. And I'm going to veer off topic for just 1 second, just a little bit more, because I'm going somewhere with this point. I recorded a podcast with a doctor. It's been a few months ago, and he just briefly gave his opinion on vaccines. And it wasn't the COVID vaccine, it was vaccines actually for children, and some of the debate about autism, which we're actually seeing that debate come out again with the presidential election on the forefront. But anyway, he just briefly mentioned it. I'm going to say he said 2 sentences, 3 sentences, 20 seconds max. And I didn't think much about it. And I don't like to censor my guests. I don't want to go through and cut out every little comment. I like the podcast. I like the episode to air as is. And it was actually taken down by a platform. I won't say which one on here, but it was taken down by a platform just because of that brief mentioning. Now, if they took it down, that was fine, but I actually got a penalty put on my personal account because of it. And that was a little upsetting, because I just recently listened to a podcast that's a big one, and the gentleman put it up on this platform, and they went in depth about this issue. I mean in depth about this issue, and talked about it for probably close to a good 30 minutes, unpacking it or more. And that was not taken down. And it was the same topic. It was the same opinion. But what I'm seeing is this censorship, which is disturbing. I understand we don't want false information out there, but this is the problem. If we start letting institutions decide this is valid and this is true and this is not, we run a risk of true information not making it out, because then it's censorship. And censorship is not where we want to go as a country, as a society. And that is my opinion. And I know that went off topic a little bit, but what got me thinking about it was, once again, what happened with this particular episode. And then also just the way my comments were taken about, I was accused of supporting women being overweight, and I was accused of going with, one person called it liberal doctrine. There was no doctrine. I'm talking about muscle. And it's ridiculous to feel that you can't say anything anymore without that. So, giving my opinion on body positivity, because I did say it was not a body positivity comment. If that is your jam, if that's your perspective, totally fine. I actually do not go with that movement, because I do believe it's important for health to maintain a healthy body fat percentage and enough muscle. Notice I didn't say a number on the scale. I said a healthy body fat percentage and a healthy amount of muscle. So we want women not to be overly fat. And again, this is not a judgment call or a name calling. It is meaning body fat, just a statistic. We don't want too much of that and not enough of the muscle. And that's really where I was going. And the reason that I don't hop on board a lot of times, with this body positivity, because I did find it to be a bit political when I looked into it. And I actually, this goes way back, but a couple of years back, I was attacked really by someone in that movement based on the modeling pictures that I posted and what I was putting forth. So no, I'm not a follower of that. If you are, that's fine. Not saying there's anything wrong with it, but my perception was so misconceived that I really wanted to address it in this episode because it ties in with what we're talking about. Why we gain weight, body fat, and lose muscle, and all of it goes to the midsection and wraps around the organs. Why the heck does that happen? There are these hormonal shifts. There is this roller coaster ride, and then there is this decline. And if we don't address this decline with certain habits, and it does not have to be HRT, like I said, that's not for everybody, but with our nutrition, with as many whole, organic, natural foods as possible, and the right type and amount of protein. We're not going to a fast food joint for our protein. We're getting it from grass-fed, grass-finished beef. We're getting it from pastured poultry. We're getting it from, if you can tolerate eggs, we're getting it from good sources. So I know that I dove into quite a few things and went down some rabbit holes, but these were the things whenever I'm preparing for an episode. And sometimes I do my podcast episodes last minute because of this, because I want to feel it. I want it to be something that's in my mind, in my heart, and my community is asking me about or concerned about. I want to have that passion in the episode, and that's sometimes why I will do a last minute episode, as is this one. So as I record this, we are going into the 4th of July. And as you listen to this, we are going into the 4th of July. If you hear this before July 5th, you can jump into Buns and Guns. There is a full description of what this program includes in the links. I'm not going to go into all that. I'm going to include the link to the scale that I use, which measures not only weight, but body fat and skeletal muscle. And I'm also including a link to my new store on Thorne Supplements. So I have partnered with Thorne, and they set up a store, a dispensary. It's a funny word to me because dispensary in New Mexico, and I'm assuming other places, means something entirely different than supplements, but that's what they call it. And I've picked some products that I personally endorse and would use with myself and my clients. One suite of products that I have is strictly focused on metabolism for women and regulating blood glucose levels. So I will include that link as well. And until we talk again, if you are in the United States of America, I wish you a happy 4th of July. But if you're not, wherever you are in this big wide world, I wish you every blessing.